2.2G, we'll have appointments for the Hazar Viability Review Team. 2.2H, a letter of support for dialysis machine. I forwarded a letter to the councillors this morning from Dawn. And there any other additions? Ellen?
Mr. Chairman, under 3.3C, we'd like to add an item to do with the wastewater system in Carsland area, to do with an off-site levy bylaw.
Okay. Okay, anything else? Motion to adopt the amended agenda. Donna? Any questions? All in favor? Carried. Adoption of the minutes. November 21st. Just hold it here. We have an appointment at 11 o'clock. We'll do the appointment first. M. Bima appointment. 3.1A.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to present a project that is near and dear to my heart. The project is not about development. It's not about projects, actually. It's about people. It's about seniors in our community.
Could you talk a little closer to the mic,
certainly.
please?
It's about seniors in our community. Just want to share a couple of stories, my own journey, seeing what's happening with seniors care. I met a little lady named Elsie. She was a roommate of my mom in Rocky View Hospital in her final days, and she had no one to visit her, barely at all. Her face lit up when our family walked in the door, and it broke my heart to see that. And then I ran into another little lady in Safeway and late at night, pushing a shopping cart that she barely could. And it broke my heart. Her husband had died and she was just trying to make it work. And that's why I'm here. I'm here because I care about the seniors, not just in this community, but seniors in general. And I'm here to ask the County of Wheatland to partner in a project that is near to my heart. And it's a project all about caring for seniors in a way that is allows them dignity and allows us to afford compassion and love. So I have a presentation, and that'll be followed by my engineer's presentation on water and wastewater, and hope to have an opportunity to field some questions at the end of it. So I will just allow my presentation.
Okay. Could you make that screen work too, Ellen? No, it's the presentation. Oh,
It's
that's on now.
okay.
Now it's off.
Okay.
Okay.
Hello, everybody. That was a really wonderful presentation. I hadn't seen that yet, and I was moved. I think the concept that Marcia has invented is overdue, and I'm kind of excited to be involved with it. I have many, many projects, but this one has got a much different intent behind it, which you can see. It's not about money. In my world, most things are about money and the environment. This is about, yes, money and the environment, but it's also about helping people. Kind of nice. So anyway, my presentation is about the wastewater system. I own a firm of water and wastewater scientists and engineers. We're located in Black Diamond. We have about 10,000 square feet of shop and office and have been around for a long time. A little bit low key, but I've built everything from high pressure steam systems to potable water systems to wastewater systems. Probably responsible for 20 or 30 SAGD plants. Have a number of municipalities and villages that I'm an engineer of record for, and lots of developers. And I met Marcia through a referral from someone that I'd done work with, and she explained to me what we were doing and what she needed. And so I started off with a standalone system because that's what we were told to do. So we invented a process concept for her site that would meet the standards, and those designs we've used elsewhere, including for this area, and gained approval. So I'm going to figure out how to work this, and then I'll get on with the presentation. Sorry. Am I doing something wrong? I guess I am. I'm trying to start this thing. Well, I have to toggle them, just maybe toggle them manually then? Even then, it's not changing on there. Oh my goodness, it's kind of weird. Should I restart it up? Oh, okay, well, I'll chat for a couple secs. My university professor, Dr. Ryan, said when you do a presentation, you tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. So I'm going to maybe take this 5-minute advantage to hone it in a little better. So I'm going to talk today mostly about regional systems and also a patented technology that Banner invented quite some time ago, and how that could be used to basically serve the greater good of Marcia's project as well as the county themselves. The Carsland Lagoon is actually pretty famous. I've heard about it a bunch of times through Dr. Crowther and Dennis Westhoff, and I know I'm very familiar with the complexities of this area in terms of dealing with Alberta environment. Felt the pinch myself a few times on a few projects. But today what I want to describe to you is how this patented technology could probably decouple a couple important things for the county of Wheatland. The regulatory maze that we exist in right now, and also a significant reduction in potential capital costs for future expansion. Okay. In addition to that, it could possibly, and I believe this to be true, decouple the issue that Alberta Environment is facing right now about WISER. I don't know if you've heard of WISER or not. Dave, I'm sure you have, right? WISER from the federal government came out in January of 2015. Basically restricts all lagoon technologies from pretty much disposing of their water if it can be proven to reach any waterway. And so Carsland is on the edge of that. Right now, I'm currently going through with another one of my municipalities a review from the feds, actually, because they think that. And the bottom line is it's law, and the ammonia has to be removed. Okay, so it makes it a bit complicated. This particular project would decouple that completely, which you will see very clearly if I can get this thing fired up and run it. Okay, well, why don't I just, oh no. What, should I try reloading this maybe? Or should we save it to the hard drive, maybe? I brought. Zip. That's what I think, maybe, right? There we are. Okay, so I just have to kick this little front. Okay. So, without a further ado, I'll start my presentation. Okay. So this first slide is a little introduction slide, but you know, Marcia's done a great job of sort of laying out. I'm James Marr from Banner Environmental Engineering. I want to talk about briefly about independent on-site systems possible, and then I prefer the regional strategy. I think everybody does. Once we started looking at it, the county brought it up, and so it was just natural. It's one of those times when you do a project and it naturally falls in. A lot of times when I do independent versus regional, it's not so natural. This one was. It's just real clear. Independent, we looked at, for potable water, we have a well. There's viable treatment for it. We looked at an advanced membrane bioreactor with the Bannerat surface discharge. And in our opinion, in the end, we would be successful with Alberta Environment. It would be just like anything with Alberta Environment in this area. It's a very difficult, the approval process is about double to triple what it is in other parts of the province. And I can speak to that because I'm doing that all over the province. In the southern area is a lot more difficult to get approval. But we are successful in our strategy in terms of approval. So that gives you a little bit depiction of the layout, but Marcia's already kind of laid that out for us. So some background on the project. Okay, so we initiated the standalone evaluation. We used the patented Banner at-grade effluent design. Our technology, basically, we have it throughout Alberta, BC, and the Northwest Territories. We have over 10 years of operations with never a violation. We combine what's called Title 2022 certified Banner wastewater treatment plant and a field. And so Title 22 means basically it's recognized by the US EPA, by the Alberta government, even though they don't have a recycle policy. What it means is the membranes are small enough to screen out virus. So the water is basically probably cleaner than it is in the slough or the river at times it comes out. And it's suitable in the US for feeding straight back into a potable plant, 100% undiluted and retreated and redrank. That's what Title 22 means. Okay, so what we do is when we build our systems in the end, we slant the cost away from the field and disposal and put it more into the plant. Okay, that's the process that we propose to use as a standalone. Okay, the regulatory maze that's been created is very difficult to explain, but I'm going to wait a little bit later on the slide. But the Alberta Environment Fact Sheet that came out in 2014 and started to catch on up until 2016, it transfers the authority of the approval of a field from Alberta Environment to Municipal Affairs. And that's an important thing to understand. It may not seem like it yet, but it will become very apparent once we get into the discussions. So normally you think you have to go to Alberta Environment for approval for everything, but a field you don't. It transfers to basically Municipal Affairs, and that's supported by the regulations. If you read the regulations and understand them carefully, in the Private Sewage Act, there's a cutoff at 25 cubes, but it doesn't say that the chief administrator of Municipal Affairs isn't still in charge. It says that he's in charge, but it doesn't have to meet code. Okay, the fact sheet, and I know that because I hired a lawyer to get a legal opinion. Okay, because it's such a maze, the regulators half the time don't understand the whole picture. Bottom line is they came out with a fact sheet that did what I'm saying in writing. So now Municipal Affairs is in charge. So our approach now is go to Municipal Affairs, get the field approved, and then it's basically like a notification. in some cases to Alberta Environment. And if it's not a notification, it gets wrapped up in the EP approval for the wastewater plant. Does not need a water diversion permit, does not need a specific advertisement because it involves subsurface flow. Now, if you understand the EPA Act and the Activities Designation Regulation, which falls from the EPA Act, it identifies subsurface flows as an exemption from EPA, which means, again, that municipal affairs supports the approval of that, which means if you go to a field, this is what I'm telling you what I'm going to tell you, and then I'm going to tell you later, it doesn't need a water diversion or water act approval. It cuts the regulatory maze way down, okay? And so anyway, when we were approached about using the regulatory, so for us on the standalone system, we believe we can go the traditional route, getting an EPA approval, no problem. We get the field approved first, then we go in and get the wastewater treatment plant approved, okay? But then when regional came up, it was even simpler and better. So we basically came along board and we looked at the Carsland Lagoon, okay? And so that's where the regulatory complexities become much less complicated. And I'll carry on in the next slide. So here's a shot of the regional, and this is an important slide because it shows that everything's in close proximity and there's significant potential populations all close by. The bottom line is it's, common sense suggests regional is just going to make a lot more sense as opposed to having water and wastewater locations and operations in every location. Simple economics in the end are going to really not make sense to do them independently because one operator can run through the three of them as opposed to having three sets. And so, again, we'll talk about that a little later. But that gives us a geographic sort of setting of the three locations we're seeking to assist in terms of regionalization. Okay, and this is the Carsland Lagoon. Okay, and so what this slide shows in the end, and I'm going to draw your attention to, in fact, I think I'll just pass them around. I want you to take a little bit of a look at those drawings, and then once they've gone all around, I'll explain the technology. And so what we're saying in this particular slide is that the regional system for the wastewater it's a very focused and natural evolution in terms of how to manage the discharge. Currently, you're discharging, currently we're discharging in the overland stream that theoretically will eventually connect up with the Bow River. What we're saying is that you can use a banner at surface, and these lands that are all available, we already pre-sized them. And we believe that we can go to Alberta Labour and get a field approved so that the water can be just released during the 7-month period of summertime. And it can beneficially be uptaken by all these locations. And then therefore, you really wouldn't need a discharge at all. The other thing that's very important about this is that because the lagoon already is approved under a code of practice, the code of practice allows for the installation of a field that's approved, which is now approved under municipal affairs, by a simple notification to Alberta Environment. And so that's really important to understand because when we make an application for an approval, before it gets to the director, it can take a decade. Because they can ask questions, they can do all sorts of stuff, they can ask you to do it, but on a notification, it goes to the director immediately. So it comes straight to the head, and then if you have an issue with it, it allows for a much cleaner resolution in comparison to the traditional approval approach. It doesn't take 10 years, it takes a month after it gets into the director, and then you get to meet with them face to face. And so that's a much different regulatory situation than what you've been traditionally dealing with, because you're always looking for an increase to discharge to the river, which is a Water Act approval. This is not a Water Act approval. This is regulated by municipal affairs, and it's exempted from EPA and the Water Act. So it's a much different animal and from a regulatory point of view. But This slide here shows, basically, if you look at it, the amount of area using a reasonable prediction. And these are predictions. We haven't done the science for these areas. But you can see that there's 3,796 people based on a 0.3 imperial gallons per day application. And by the way, we assume 300 liters per person per day. 360 is too high in today's standards. We wouldn't consider designing a facility that would run at 360. I have villages and towns that I've been operating for years. We do sophisticated leak detection. I'm way down. I'm way below 300. I don't run anywhere around that anymore. No one does. And in the end, if you're going to do responsible design, we don't have enough water to be cranking out 360 plus liters per person per capita day. It's too expensive, and it's not diligent. As an engineer, you've got to start clawing it back. You know, we're living in an age where, you know, water's important, and you can't just keep throwing numbers at it because, you know, it's going to be not a problem to predict high. It doesn't wash. It has to be a lower number nowadays. Anyway, what that shows right there is we have sufficient capacity to deal with some 4,000 people on your current lagoon site, is what our prediction is. We still have to do the science, but that's what the numbers are showing. And just to give you a difference, that's like $500,000 to $1 million versus building a mechanical plant between $5 to $7 million. So how do you do that? You know, how do you know, it's the numbers are too dramatic in the end to just stand by and say, well, we can't do this. This has to, in my opinion, it has to be looked at. So here's a slide that talks about some of the design features. It's a patent pending design from Banner. We complement this with what's called an engineered forest. So when we put our field down, we actually go in and we plant forest as well, because the forest, if you can apply 0.4, 0.3 imperial gallons per square foot per day, one tree 50 to 75 feet high, 8 to 10 inches in diameter, will evapotranspirate anywhere between 0.5 to 1 cubic meter per day. And in the fields that we're talking in there would probably be 50 to 100,000 trees that build out. Okay, so just to give you an idea of the conservative nature of the design, a forest is huge. And currently the design technologies don't know how to account for that, and don't. Frankly, the standards do not even look at it. But they know, but they just don't know how to quantify it, right? And so that works towards us, because, you know, our designs by nature end up being quite conservative because of that. We're really busy with this technology. I met with the MD of Foothills about a week after I met with you guys. And frankly, the technical brief for notification on another project has already been submitted yesterday. That's how quickly they moved. 1 week and it was in. Okay? Different technology, different application, but it's the same alignment. They already have an existing permit that says that they can submit by notification. So that's what we did. So lower capital and operating costs. It's very passive technology, basically inspected a couple times a year. It's proven technology. I've been doing this actually before that, since about 2002. I got hired by a couple large companies to develop their best practices for the Water Act aspects of it. And basically that kind of led into this. It's very reliable and safe. It considers qualitatively evapotranspiration, the unsaturated groundwater flows, and, you know, basically a better use of the defensive capacity of the environment. There's a lot of science that goes into this. I just don't have the time to go through all of it right now, which is kind of unfortunate, because it's a really super interesting way to understand the defensive nature of the environment and how we can use it to really complement everything. But I have to leave a little bit of that because we don't have all the time we need. Regulatory advantages, past approval by municipal affairs and AEP in the southern regions. We have 2 projects now that one that is ready for advertisement and approval, and the other one we just sent in on Monday. Monday, I guess, sorry, for notification. It's supported by the regulations. If you look at EPA fact sheet and the code of practice for a lagoon says right in it that if it's an approved process for disposal, then it only needs notification. So that's why I keep saying, if you go, the people that are in charge are municipal affairs. You send it to municipal affairs. We fully expect that we're going to get the exact same treatment as we did for 2 other projects. You cookie cutter the exact same design principles, they'll approve it because they've already done that. So there's a precedent there. Once that's done, you just send the notification to Alberta Environment and say, we have approval because here it is. That's what their fact sheet says. That's what EPA says. That's what the activities designation regulation, the actual law and regulations are in our favor, you know, in this particular, and it's kind of, they created the pathway. I don't know if they did it knowingly or not. I don't know, but all I know is that pathway exists now. So notification to Alberta Environment under the code of practice with the municipal affairs approval. That third line there tells you everything. That's the path right there. Okay, so it increases your discharge capacity and frequency of to the effluent field bow, trying to maintain existing registration for the discharge to the bow. That would be our intent, was to keep your existing discharge to the bow, but increase your discharge without having to go through an Alberta Environment Water Act approval, because the lands around you will soak up the water, and you can use the lagoon to store it for 5 or 7 months during the winter. It's pretty simple in the way, and it extends the lagoon from its current operation. My prediction is you probably get another 50 to 75% out of your treatment lagoon, because in municipal affairs, the maximum allowable discharge to a field is 110 and 120 BOD and TSS. Currently, we're operating at about 10 and 10. So you could theoretically, 25 years, let it creep up to 30 and 30 and 40 and 40 and still be in compliance. And it still gets treated, because when it discharges to the ground, the soil bacteria is a recognized and approved tertiary treatment system. So that's where WISER comes in. You're not going to be able to continue to discharge to the bow much longer, I think, because they're going to push. WISER's going to push, and they're going to start throwing that back at you. This gets rid of that because it basically goes on the ground, and all the phosphorus and nitrogen is consumed very quickly by the plant growth. And it goes where it's supposed to, into wood and trees and leaves, which is where we want the phosphorus and nitrogen, you know, as opposed to the rivers. Okay, so this is a little drawing, the two that you I showed or passed around. So the slide up on the far left shows how we construct the field. Basically, I get 4 strong people, and we just pull the lateral through the bush. And I started this back in early 2000. I would be on the front, sort of pushing my way through the forest and looking for reasonably level ground. And I'd have 4 people behind me pulling a 200 to 400 foot lateral of 2-inch pipe. And we just pull it onto the ground. And then you can see in the slide down below this is how I invented the project. I pulled a carpenter string through the forest. And when you have a tight forest, there's always a tree over top of your lateral somewhere. And I just pulled it level, taut string, just like a carpenter does on his forms, right? You pull it nice. In fact, that's how I came up with the idea. You know, summer jobs and stuff, setting forms for carpenters, right? And so you set those things and you put a string level on them, and then you measure the distance from the string line to the lateral. And then that's where the engineer in me comes out. I wrote a program so that I can change the orifice size along the lateral so that each squirt has the exact same amount of water coming out of it. And that's what the regulator's like. So the water coming out of hole number 1 is the same volume as the water coming out of hole 100 at the end of the lateral. And then all the variations in elevation, because the ground goes up and down, I account for those because I measure them, and each discrete hole is modeled so that basically you change a little smaller size. And being us engineers, what we did was we designed these special drill bits, and we sent them off to a powder metallurgy company in the United States who make things out of brass, which is too soft for steel, but it works perfect for plastic. We put a little reaming tool on the front of it, and we found that we could control hole size to 1/36 of an inch. Okay, so we have some special skills and some special tools that we've developed over the last decade. So all of our flow rate variations have been laboratory proven to be less than 10% variation per hole over a 300-foot length with random variations. And that's been proven now. So that in essence, it's a simple technology, but the bottom line is it has so many applications because it spreads the water for huge lengths. And it allows us to basically do it really cheap, because most of the time when they build these, they have to cut all the trees down. They have to level the ground and then make the ground level. So, I mean, when you do a field like this, that would mean you'd have to basically disrupt all the ground. We don't have to disrupt anything. We don't have to cut any trees down. We don't have to do anything. We just pull it through. You can see that one there on the left is when it was first put on. And then a little later on, when it grows in, you could barely see it. And then eventually, you know, again, these are brand new. These ones are these are put in, you know, shots of when it was first put in. We put them in on the ground, we level them, we drill the holes, and we throw a little peat moss on them, and then we throw some grass seed on it. And then yeah. And so that last slide there, you can see that you just basically cannot see the lateral anymore. By year 2, basically, it's gone. It's invisible. And so is the water. The water goes into the ground and it just grows the plants and the trees, the forest. It creates a huge microenvironment. In the case of the Carsline Lagoon, you would have trees and forest that would grow around it in the end, and it would beautify that site. And it would also remove it from visual recognition, right? Because the forest would create a visual barrier for it. Okay, so here's another slide here that shows basically what we believe, having looked at it. We could go from 750 people to 3,800 people. That's what our predicted capacity is for the effluent area. And Cara has a projected population of 750 people. Okay, the lagoon quality right now is comparable to a mechanical plant, to be honest, when I look at it, with the exception of maybe your background bacteriological counts, but that can be controlled by other methods if it was necessary, which it's not for ours, because we get like a 4-log removal across a field, so it's not necessary to do anything. But the point I'm trying to make here is, I mean, we believe this will go through municipal affairs no problem, because they're used to seeing 100 BOD and 100 TSS, and we're at 5 and 5. Regulatory advantages. It may decouple regulatory complexity. Alberta Labour Acknowledgement only requires a notification under the existing regulations. It may preclude Alberta Environment's direct or controlling involvement in the process. You could maybe use irrigation, but you know, our focus is the land application. It's a low-cost application compared to a mechanical plant. And also it deals with your WISER issues faced by everyone right now. That's all going to come up sooner or later. Right now, the province is in legal battle with the federal government over WISER. They've refused to accept it, and the federal government has not backed off. So regionalization model, regional servicing model with a single responsible authority. I didn't talk about that very much, but that's a huge thing to consider as well. It just makes a lot more sense for water, sewer, and fire protection, everything to be held under the regional aspect of it. It has economic advantages for the county because the economy scale goes up. It's supported by provincial policy. The Water for Life on basically pretty much all aspects is supports the idea of regional. It's safer and more cost effective for all the stakeholders. The county doesn't really have anything to lose on it except a chance for your proportional costs and your capital liabilities to go down. That's how, you know, looking at it from a third party, that's what I see. It's basically a low-risk solution with huge upsized cost savings and environmental benefits. Okay, for potable water, I have one slide there to talk a little bit about the expansion and optimization of the current use of the water treatment plant system to supply the Cara development. It lowers costs, increases operational capacity, both the potable water and fire protection, helps to optimize servicing agreement for all stakeholders. The Cara water for license, it could be transferred to the county in exchange for potable water supply. So basically, when you do rate-based economics, which I do a ton of in the end, 30,000 people is when the rate base starts to flatten. It doesn't make that much difference. From 30,000 people up, it's on a downward climb. So basically that means is the economy of scale is huge when you go from 750 to 1,500 people or 560 to 1,250. It's going to have a pronounced impact on your operating costs because you don't really need to add that much more, but you get twice the revenue. It's huge economy of scale. What I found working in the industry is to that 5 to 10,000 people, there's a huge economy of scale and it starts to drop off. But the big guys like EPCOR and stuff, they don't touch anything unless there's 30,000 because that's kind of their cutoff. So all of the rest of us, I've been working in rural Alberta for 25 years. I mean, it's all about economy of scale. When you can pull that off, your costs go in half. If you can bring somebody. So that's what this does, in my opinion. I mean, there's no way it won't drop your potable water operating costs and capital commitments as well. We believe regional economics of scale will lower overall costs, improve sustainability, reliability, and safety for all stakeholders of potable water in the area. And it's supported by Water Life and also all provincial grants. Regionalized systems in the end, they get a favoritism on provincial grants as well. And then there's a slide here that summarizes everything, kind of a matrix, but it's a little bit maybe too busy to end on. But I just finish off by basically saying that, the way I'm looking at it right now, I got hired to do a standalone, so I did it. I believe I could get that approved. But when I was asked to look at the regulatory aspects of a regional system and the costs, you just cannot compete with the regional. It benefits everyone. It benefits the Cara project, it benefits the county, and it benefits the province. It benefits everyone, and everyone has an opportunity to save money and end up with a better design and operation. Okay, and so I can forward. I guess I've already given this to you. So anyway, any questions at all about our approach or the technology? I hope.
Just a question. Obviously, the site has no trees on it. It's got a profuse amount of pipelines on that site. So how would you deal with the underground oil and gas pipelines on that site?
We looked at that. There's an easement there. I've dealt with pipelines lots of times in the end. It's not a problem. Basically, we could engineer the forest around the pipeline easements, and in the pipeline easements, we just use grass and use the same loading rates that we're currently allowed to do. So the water will never migrate past the root zone. So we've already got fields actually over pipeline easements. And there's not an issue that way because we don't operate it so there's any standing water. And if they do need to get in the pipeline, they just move the lateral over. And the whole site's not pipeline either. We looked at that in the end. There's a couple of easements, but we don't have any underground. We don't disrupt the land. We don't go in and cut anything. I wouldn't plant trees over the pipeline, but we would carve those sections out and just use for grass.
Any other questions? Not seeing any. Well, thanks for coming in. It's very interesting.
Just
Ben?
one question. You say that Alberta Environment has nothing to do with this system. Have you got anything from Alberta Environment saying that?
No. And let me explain that a little bit more clearly. What I'm saying is the regulations in the Act establish a path where this project could be approved by Alberta Environment by notification. In the Code of Practice, there's a section right in there that says that approved process for disposal only need to be identified to Alberta Environment via notification. That doesn't mean to say that they won't take exception to it I don't know. I honestly don't know if they would or not. All I'm saying is that that's what it says in black and white in the code of practice, and if you understand the acts and the regulations. Whether they're going to agree with my interpretation of that, I don't know. I don't know. But when you look at a capital cost of, say, $500,000 to $1 million versus $5 to $7 million for a mechanical plant, can you ignore it? And the other thing I might add, there's 600 lagoons in Alberta, all facing Weiser. And I would suggest over the next decade, a lot of them are going to end up going this route in the end to deal with Weiser. And so, I mean, I think that's the trend, that you know, if it's not our opportunity this way, it'll be someone else's. And so, you know, I say to you, I think that just from as impartial as I can be on this, I think it has to be investigated just from the sheer upside of potential cost reduction.
Okay, any other questions? I'd like to thank you for your presentation. I'm sure council will be talking about this in depth in a more appropriate time for us. But thanks for coming out.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity, and we'll look forward to any other questions or discussions that we might have.
Okay, thank you. And someone care to move for information?
I'll move we accept the presentation as information.
Okay, all in favor? Carried. Thanks again.
Thank you.
We have a 1050 ready or not? Continue on, okay. We'll go back down to adoption of the minutes, November 21st, 2017, regular council meeting minutes.
I'll move to adopt the minutes.
Scott's moved. Make sure I get the right ones here. Is there any questions or concerns? All in favor? Carried. November 21st, 2017, public hearing minutes for bylaw 2017-16. Jason's moved. Is there any questions or concerns? All in favor? Carried. And the November 5th, 2017 regular council meeting minutes. I think that should be December 5th. I think I said November. Amber's moved. Any questions or concerns? All in favor? Carried. And we'll move down to I'm thinking we'll go to 2.2A. Request for decision, 8th Annual Alberta Care Seminar. Do we have time for that, or we'll do it? Okay, I'll do it next then. Right now, we'll do the 8th Annual Alberta Care Spring Seminar on page 26. Okay, Amber's moved. Is there any questions? All in favor? Carried. Okay, we'll go back up to 2.1A. Page 25. Any questions? Council's wishes. Tom?
I move that we accept the CAO on Green for Life site.
Okay, is information? Any questions? All in favor? Carried. And we'll go request for decision. Brownlee Emerging Trends in Municipal Law. Page 31.
I'll move the attendance of county councilors to attend emerging trends in municipal law by Brownlee for February 8th, 2018, Coast Plaza. No overnight accommodations on that.
Any questions? All in favor? Carried.
Mr. Chairman, when the 11:50 appointment is
See
ready.
that now. So we'll move up to 1150 Protective Services Representatives, 2.4A. Go ahead.
Good morning, Your Worship, members of council, senior administration, and guests in the chambers. Today is quite a special occasion and a first for Wheatland County, in that we have two of our community peace officers receiving medals to commemorate their service to all Albertans, but more specifically to the visitors and residents of Wheatland County. The medals they are receiving today are called the Alberta Emergency Services Medal, or AESM for short. To be eligible for this medal, a person must have been serving after January 1st, 2000, when the medal was created, and have at least 12 years of service in any of the emergency services fields, all within the province of Alberta. It's a silver medal bearing the provincial shield and the words Emergency Services Alberta, and on the reverse is the provincial flower with the words In Service to Albertans. The ribbon is blue, representing, of course, our province, with 3 white stripes, which represent, good service, loyalty, and conduct. I was on the original awards committee that developed this medal in 2000, and it was always intended that all members of the emergency services receive it, but the police and peace officers never really took up and recognized the award. In 2015, the Provincial Awards Committee was reestablished and by the Minister of Municipal Affairs, and I was privileged to chair that committee, which reviewed the criteria for the award and created additional provincial awards, which we'll see in the near future. This time, we made a point of being very inclusive of all emergency services members and the contributions of every person who in any way has direct contact with everyday Albertans in their time of need, which brings us to today. Before council are two very deserving recipients of this medal who are very privileged, we are very privileged to have working here at Wheatland County, Senior Peace Officer Jeff Sear and Peace Officer Chris Berman. Presenting the awards will be our Reeve Glencaster. Worship.
Thank you.